Hello everyone, my name is Hannah Collison from Inspired Creations online school of sugarcraft, and today I'm going to show you how to make buttercups and forget-me-nots in sugar. This is a picture of the creation, and if you'd like to join in, then I will show you the kit list as well. And if you have any questions, please feel free to get in touch. My email is hannah@inspiredcreations.uk.com. So the first thing we need to do to make the buttercup is to actually create the middle, the centre, the stamens. And I've just got some normal cream cotton here, but white cotton or yellow cotton will be absolutely fine. If you've got any kind of pot that you can kind of lodge this cotton into, a cup or something else, just to stop it from running around the surface and perhaps onto the floor. And then we're going to wrap the cotton around probably about 15 to 20 times. I'm going to keep just a little gap between my fingers so that when I'm ready, I can actually pull it off. Otherwise it becomes too tight. So we're just going to wrap that around 7, 8, 9, 10. See, it's rolling around already. I need something a little bit deeper than that. 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 18, 19, 20. Oh. Okay, so if you want more, you can, but the plan is to actually take this off my finger and fold it in half in a figure of 8. So these strands will actually double up. But if you feel like this isn't going to be enough, I'm just going to do 5 more. So that will bring me up to 25, and just cut off and put that to one side. We'll take a 28 gauge wire, which has been cut into 3. Yeah, so that they're full length wires, but they've been cut into thirds. Carefully remove the cotton from your finger, and then you're going to twist it in the middle so that it looks like a number 8. Then once you've twisted, if you just fold one loop over the other, so you get a smaller loop, and then you're going to feed your wire through. The wire is going to go about halfway through, and then we're going to fold the 2 ends together, and like a sandwich tag, twist the wire, keeping hold of your loop so that it doesn't unravel. So you can twist that maybe 4 or 5 times just to make sure that it's all secure. And then using your small or large scissors or something that you can just pop into the loop and just pull all those loops together so that they become evenly spaced. Now we need to tape this. So I'm just going to take a little bit of this is half width, so it's 5mm thick Nile green tape or spring or light green tape, whatever you've got. And we can just pull a little strip off, give it a good stretch. That'll double it in length because it releases the glue. And then if you scoop all your cotton fronds to one side and lay the tape so that it is partway on the end of the cotton and on the wire. So we need to overlap the cotton so that when we cut it, it doesn't all open up, and just lap the tape so it touches the tape on the other side. The tape is sticky, but it only really sticks to itself. Okay, so if you make contact with the other side on the tape, then it should hold. Pinch really firmly between your fingers, and then if you turn the angle of the tape so that it is kind of diagonal, and tape down. Okay, and you may as well tape pretty much all the way. You can leave the bottom part where you've only got one single wire left, and just give that a good old twist and twiddle on. So you just want to make sure it's nice and tight and neat and really pressed on up here. I'm going to go back in. Sometimes when you tape the cotton, you'll find that it actually shortens some of the loops. So we want to try and get that as even as possible. And then holding on to this part here where I've taped, we can take your scissors, small or large, go through all the loops and just cut them through. just run the blade of the scissors through a few more times, just so that you can be sure that you have actually got all the loops cut. Now at the moment that is quite long. The daisy petal or the daisy flower center is fairly short, so we want to trim this. Now I would say we need to trim it probably to about here. I'll give you a measurement on that in a moment. And when you trim, because these fronds can go everywhere, just have something that you can use as a bit of a rubbish bin. So we just scooch with your finger and maybe position your nail where you want it chopped, and then you can use your sharpest scissors to trim along your fingernail, and that way that'll give you a good guide. Just try and keep it as neat as possible as you do, and then we will release this and just open it out. Okay, now the measurement on there in terms of length is no more than 1 centimetre. It's actually just under a centimetre. Okay, and the last thing we need to do on the centre now is to colour it. So you can get some of your lemon yellow petal dust out. Ignore the rest of the colours for the moment. You could just get your lemon yellow out. Just pick some of that up with your flat-headed brush or whatever brush you like to work with, and then we can just colour. Sometimes on the daisies they've got a little bit of lime green in the centre, so you could green it up a little bit, but here we just want to catch the colour as best we can all the way around. Now if you're we need to make more than one really to practice the technique, and also in the garland, if you're making the full garland, I've got 3 in there, but the way I want to work for those who are on the 3-week course is, and anything you want to add into your garland you can. I'm going to add, so for example, if you're attending the daffodil workshop, then you can add your daffodil into the garland as well, or anything else you've made this year that you quite fancy adding. So I would say an odd number of 3 buttercups would be a good amount to practice today, and it will be a good amount to go in your garland. So using my pale yellow paste, I'm going to break off probably no more than a centimetre ball of paste, and the rest is just going to go undercover, maybe in a bag, just so that we can keep it from drying out. So I'm just using a ball which is just a centimetre diameter. Okay, make sure it's warmed up. Now we are using a pulled flower technique. Pulled as in pulled pork, pulling. The pulled flower technique is the best way is to use this tool, and this tool has got 5 kind of ridges on one side and it's got 6 on the other side. It's actually called a 5-6 star modeling tool. Okay, tapered tone star modeling tool, and we want 5 petals, so we're going to use the side that's got the 5 markings, the 5 ridges on it, and that's the one that kind of is fat here but then goes to a point. The other end has got 6 and that is just a straight point. This is good for making bluebells and 6-petal flowers. Okay, so just going back to this side, I'm going to pinch out on one side a little bit of a cone. Okay, so we've got a fat cone, and then using a bit of corn flour to help stop this tool from sticking, I'm going to put the pointy end of that into the center of my fat part of my cone, just right into there, and push it on. Now pulled flowers take a bit of practice, so if you've attended some of my previous courses, you'll find that I've got you've already got some of the techniques down, but these are slightly trickier flowers to make, which is well, it's good to practice. So once you've got the tool into about here, you can then just gently pull out, and you should see some markings, which are guide cutting lines. I'm going to take my sharp, small scissors, hold the star shape towards me, and I'm going to focus on just cutting each of the bottom ones as I turn round. If you're keeping your blade of your scissors at one position, then you can be sure or more sure that you're actually cutting through the paste straight. If you start to do angled cuts, you might find that your petals become uneven. So we're just going to keep the blade of the scissors in the same position and just move the marked piece of paste around until it gets to where the blade is and snip. So once you've made all 5 cuts, you've got the makings of a little flower. Open them up, take your finger and thumb and just press the corners here. When you cut, it gives you sharp angles, so you need to round these off. Okay, so all pull flowers start like this, and then it's whatever you do to make it into the shape you want. I'm now going to change from a sideways position with my finger and thumb to have my thumb at the bottom, my finger at the top, and we're just going to pinch each petal now to start to make it look wide. Okay, so that would be the start of a normal blossom. Now, I'm just going to put a little bit of cornflour onto this part of my finger, and I can rest one of the petals across the knuckle end of my finger, so it's where it feels bony. Okay, and I've actually got one of these tools, which is a silk veining tool. This is made by Gem. On one side, if you get the plastic one, it's got a smile on one end. And on the other end, it's got texture that if you roll on a flat piece of sugar paste, just looks like silk. And this will give you the ridges or the texture that you need. But you can also make this using a cocktail stick as well. So I'll show you a couple of processes. So what we want to do is rest the tool onto the middle of the petal and have the tool pointing a little bit upwards towards probably the corner of your room. And then you're going to flare left and right. So you're pressing down on that bony part of your finger to enable you to flare out, but only the edge. So probably the most work I've done is very thin round here, coming off both edges when I flare, but there's no work in this area here. Okay, so that's quite important, because if you start to flare the whole flower, it just becomes very wide and actually not how you want. Now you'll notice that as I've tried to pull that off, some of the sugar paste is attached to my finger. That's a bit frustrating, but you can neaten this off with a pair of scissors, and then I would say it's probably an indication that you need to put more corn flour on your finger. So when you've done one, you then start to work around each petal, corn flour on the tool as well. So rest it in the middle of the petal, having the point of the tool facing upwards towards the corner of the ceiling, and then flare one way and the next. I find if you don't start in the middle that you end up with more flare on one side than the other. So good old press to widen and thin that petal, and then just take a bit of care as it comes off. Okay, now if you're using a cocktail stick, what you would need to do, well, you can actually use a kebab stick as well if you prefer, but really what you need to do is take the pointy end off the tip of the cocktail stick before you start. So here is, we've got it, it's the same thickness all the way to about there, and then it tapers. So if we take half of that point off, just catch the offcut so it doesn't fly anywhere you don't want it to. And then instead of using this tool, you can use a cocktail stick. So I'm going to go on to getting a bit of corn flour on the tool and your finger, depending on how you think it's going to stick. And we position the cocktail in the center, pressing down on the edge of the petal. You can see the tip of the tool is upwards, so facing across your shoulder and pointing towards the corner of the room, and then you can flare left and right, and that will give you a very similar texture. There's really not a lot of difference between the cocktail stick and the tool, the difference being that the tool's bigger, so it's easier to handle, but if you haven't got it, you can just use a common cocktail stick. So we're going to flare all 5. Again, don't forget to recorn flour as soon as you think, especially if you've got hot hands. And then we can, I'm just going to cheat a little bit and go back over this when I'm pressing onto the petal, probably to about halfway here, just to make it all look similar. Ideally, you don't want to keep going back. Okay, so now what I'm going to do, I'm just going to go back in with my 5-sided tool, and if you line up the ridge this time to go so that the ridge comes to the middle of the inside of each of those petals, and just press in a little bit and against each petal. So I'm just pressing against there, and that will help you as a guide. It's not going to show, but it'll just guide you into the middle when you put your center in that you've made. So this is just a plain blossom at this stage, but the thing that makes it look more buttercuppy, we put it onto our foam pad. So this is a pad that's got a little bit of give in it, so a hard surface won't work for this. I don't like to pop it into the holes because that doesn't really give me the best movement that I want for my flower. Take a ball tool or the bone modeling tool, the big end, bit of corn flour so it doesn't stick. Have it facing down. Now normally we work with this tool upright, but this time I want it so it can press down. I'm going to go to each of the centers of the petals, so come in from the edge a little bit and literally just press in. Move the tool, move the petal so it's wholly sitting on the foam pad before you go ahead and depress.
It's a bit blurry, Hannah.
So we'll take one of our little centers that we made earlier, collect your petal that you've made, and from the front we're going to push that through and try and make it so it comes out the center of the back here. Now, as you get to the point where you're going to have to pull the green part of the tape through the flower, you're going to need to start to twist it so that it just gently makes the flower center open. And then we can pull these petals. The idea here is that you don't make these petals stick to each other, so that when you open them up, you've got this more telltale sign of a buttercup. Now at the back, it's a bit dumpy. So between my fingers, I'm just going to press that on. And we've got, we don't want too much of a back on here. So I'm just going to press my nail all the way around. And that bit then we can pull off. Now you could reuse that, it's probably a bit dry. Just try and neaten this off a bit as well. Now the one thing I didn't show you is if you think it's not going to stick, you can just take a little bit of your sugar glue and paint that onto this green bulby bit, which is actually now fully sitting inside here. So if you're worried that that's not going to hold, you can put a little bit of glue, not too much. We've got a calyx going on here as well, but that is your buttercup. Okay, we're going to put that to one side so that we can let it dry. When I'm, if I show you size-wise here, this is quite big. You can make them smaller. It's about 2 centimeters. Okay, so try not to make them too huge, otherwise they're going to look like a different flower. You could work, if you wanted to, with maybe 1 centimeter just under a centimetre of paste will make a smaller one. Okay, so I'm just going to show you, let me show you on here again, the forget-me-nots, these ones here. So I'm using I've just pre-coloured this with an ice blue. Any blue will be fine because you can always dust up to get the correct colouring. And I've pulled off 1/2 centimetre ball of paste, really, really, really tiny. Okay. So we'll try and work quite close to the camera so you can see this. And make sure that you warm this up. And it's such a small bit. All you can really do is pinch it. Try not to flatten and fold. Maybe apply a bit of pinching pressure between 2 of your fingers just to help that become crack free. And then we're going to take nearly 1/2 of it and roll it into a point. That way you've got something to hold on. And then I'm just going to hold it so that I can see the rounded tip, the rounded end. Then you take your 5-sided part of this tool, find the center and evenly press against the side all the way around. The tool itself has gone into about halfway. And we can pull the tool out and that will reveal just a tiny star shape. And that we can then snip with our scissors, remembering if you can, just to keep the scissors in one position and turn the cone so that the line goes to the scissors. It just makes a little bit more even, makes for a bit more even cut. And then you've got to open these petals. Now you can see the size of the flower. It's really difficult to handle this, and that's the trick. Now, once you've opened the petals, if you feel like you can't get your fingers in there to round off the edges like you did with the buttercup, then just find anything, any tool that will enable you just to touch the tips, edges, to round them off. And if you wanted to, you could actually just finish your flower as it is. You don't need to do all the processes. This would be something that you could maybe drop as a little filler flower down onto a cupcake with or without a wire. So just make sure they're all separated still. I need to get some corn flour onto my finger. And then using your cocktail sticks, it's probably better using this because this is smaller. We're going to flare out like we did before, but try not to press down too hard. We just need a little bit of a thin edge just right on the edge there. Remembering that your tool is not going, the pointed end of the tool is not going to touch the paste. Come off the edges. So roll from the middle, off the edge here and off the edge there. Sorry, I'm trying to get really close, but it's probably looking a bit, probably making you a bit seasick. And then the last one here. Okay, so that's, you've got a tiny, tiny little blossom, and you'll notice here that my petals are not even in size. So the next step is to take a 28 gauge wire, and this we need to put a little hook into the end. So I'm just going to take my tweezers, clamp right at the top here, and turn that piece of wire over, and you're going to make yourself as small a hook as you possibly can in 28 gauge. And a 28 gauge is more than enough to hold this weight of flour. Now on here, I feel like I want to push this time the pointy end, so the opposite end to the one you've just been using, into the middle and make a little hole, a little opening. Take the wire, and the unhooked end can be fed through from the front here, through the back. And as you get to the point where you're nearly ready to put your hook in, if you just put a little bit of glue onto that hooked end. So not much, I've barely got any moisture on my brush. And then we'll pull that hook through so we cannot see it. It's gone in probably about 1 millimetre, and then we can just press the back here just to neaten it off. Okay, now there is a yellow centre to go on, so I'm going to take a little bit of my yellow that I was using for my buttercup. If you just warm the paste up and make it come to a point, and then between your finger and thumb, take the smallest amount off. It's going to look like a tiny poppy seed. Okay, it's really, really small. Forget-me-nots are tiny, and the centres are tiny as well. So probably on my ruler, that's only going to measure about 1 millimetre. I can take my cocktail stick, find the middle of that tiny little piece, take it onto my cocktail stick. Now it's possible that this will be wet enough, but if it's not, and I've got the worst brush for this, you want to find one that's a little bit kind of fine and pointed, because I just want to get a little bit of moisture right in the middle there. And because in theory the flower is wetter than the piece on the cocktail stick, as I push on, it should transfer in, and there's a little hole in the middle. So apart from a little bit of colouring, and of course we need to take probably to about halfway on the wire with your Nile green, that is your forget-me-not. They're very cute, but they are fiddly, so take some time to work this out and see how small you can get. So we're going to put the calyx on the buttercup next. That's what it looks like on the back. It's quite insignificant. You could probably get away with it if you didn't want to put it on there. You could just colour the back green. Okay, but I'm going to use a calyx cutter. It's a small jasmine cutter or calyx. This is the Orchestra product 1R15, just R15. But PME do a nice little mini jasmine cutter, which is the same, slightly bigger. So just warm the paste up so it feels nice and soft and crack free. And then if you need to, put a bit of corn flour onto the board and the rolling pin to stop it from sticking. And just roll your green out nice and thin. Everything's really thin. Just peel that off the board. I'm going to put a bit of corn flour on there to help stop it sticking while I'm using my cutter. And then because I've been rolling it out this way, if I turn this over now, it's a little bit drier on the underside, which will give you a crisper cut. And this shape is really, really small. So sometimes it collects the paste from a previous cut. So just watch that and just make sure it's clean. And then I'm just going to pop that down onto my paste, give a good press, and then rub around to take the excess off. This bit's definitely going to get stuck into the cutter, so you need to find something that will go through the back here. And I'm going to just use the back of a paintbrush, or this is just my silk veining tool that I was using earlier to pull that shape out. Now we're going to transfer that piece onto a foam pad because we need to be able to press this a little bit to get a cupped effect. And I'm also going to just reinforce the pointed tips. We may have to do this again after we've pressed each sepal with the tool. Take your foam modelling tool, a little bit of corn flour, and just press face down again onto each of the sepals, keeping the point. Very simple, there's not a lot of detail going into this. Then take your buttercup. You want to put a little bit of glue on the back here where that's going to attach. So not too much. I've barely got anything on my brush. It's only just slightly dampened. Pierce the center of your calyx and then feed that up as carefully as you can until it makes contact with the buttercup. and then you can just press it into place. And that's your calyx. The forget-me-nots don't have a calyx. We're just going to paint those or dust those a little bit with green in a little while. So I'm going to take one of my buttercups. Really straightforward colouring on these. They're yellow. So we're going to be quite delicate with this because we don't want the petals to break. And it's always a good idea to, I like to put my colour onto a piece of tissue in a tray or a shoebox lid or on a saucer, something where it's not going to kind of topple over. And then take a little bit of the colour and put it onto your brush, just working it into your brush like blusher, because you don't want too much in the way of excess or crumbs. And then all I want to do is very gently brush the outside edge of the petal and work my way inwards. Okay, so just from the outside in. Now, it is a patience game because it takes a while to realize how much, what volume wise you can have in your brush before it starts kind of going everywhere, and how many times you need to scrape it across the edge to get the color onto the buttercup. So just be very light, very gentle, very patient, and just keep going. There is a real temptation to go from the center outwards where you can, but your petal might be a bit brittle and might be prone to cracking off that way. But also you don't really want to get a line of color in there. So it's still probably better to go from the outside edge in, and what's happening is the excess kind of dust is coming off the brush and onto the petal itself. And just keep going until you've got the shade that you want. Don't worry that your brush is pushing the center stamens out of the way, because you can always fluff those up after. And we definitely need to do some work on the back as well. So just from the outside edge down. Most of the things I colour are from outside edge drawing down, nice and light, so your petal doesn't break. They are quite brittle when they're dry, so it's good to have some spares. You'll probably find it'll take easier on the outside than it does on the inside. But it's quite nice because you can go back to the inside, and whatever colours is just kind of brushed off onto the edge, you can draw into the centre of the flower. Okay. And just work your way all the way around until you feel like you've got your colour how you want it to be. Yellow on the screen doesn't come up very well at all. And my main overhead light has just run out. So you've got a bit of a strange colour going on here. Remembering, do the back as well. And then once you've got your yellow all the way around here, and I need to do a bit more work on this one, then you can come in with a little mix of yellow and moss green. So I'm just going to take a little bit of my green onto my tissue, pick up some of the yellow as well. So I've got a limey shade, so something along the lines of the colour you've got for your calyx. And we're just going to brush up each sepal just to bring a bit of realistic colour. And if that gives a little tint on the back of the yellow of your flower, that's absolutely fine. Okay. And the forget-me-nots, they're super easy to colour. They have a little bit of green, or that same shade green on the back, just enough to take a bit, give you a bit of a green edge on there. So that's our pretend calyx. This needs to be taped down. And then we go on to our blue, which if it's too strong, then we need to add in a little bit of white or pearl white. Just got to find myself a clean brush just to pull some of that colour. I've got a little bit of pearl white, and we can just mix that. So we're getting more of a bluebell shade, a pale bluebell shade. Work that into your brush, and then same as before, just very gently outside edge in. It really won't have much colour on at all. And one thing we want to try and avoid is actually colouring that yellow centre. So just a light dusting is probably all it needs, enough to take the cornflower off. And that's all you need to do on those. I'm just going to put a twist of tape onto there. So if you remember, I talked to you about being a little bit further down. Give that a couple of twists, and while it can still move, push it up to where the bottom of the sugar starts, and then tape down to just over halfway. Tear or cut the tape off. So your forget-me-nots could you can put them in however you want, but I like to put them in bundles of 3. So I'm going to start, if I start with my smallest one up, and then the bigger one slightly lower down, and there's a bit of distance between them, not much, okay, but they're at different levels. And I want to have a bit of stem showing. So as a trio, I'm probably going to, on the lowest flower, roughly measure about 1 inch down, and that's where they're all going to be taped. So there's just in little bundles. They look better than just individually randomly stuck into another spray. And then we can just take that down. Just watch out these wires don't twist. Just, if they do start to twist, just straighten them out. And you don't need to go all the way down, especially if you're putting this into your garland or another spray, because it will it's unnecessary, because once it's in the main spray it won't show. So these yeah, they look quite nice in a little clump like that. Or I have got another arrangement here which has got a cluster of them, excuse my arm, including little buds. Let's just get that focused on the camera. So you can see on here, they've gone in as a little kind of posy, which is quite pretty. These are a bit bigger than the ones we're making here. But you can see how that would look quite nice as a little cluster with buds as well. And the buttercups, keep those separately, but if you want another idea, all we could do is just tip the heads up just a little bit, give some distance, maybe 2 inch between each flower, and then you can make a little chain of buttercups. So the first one will be a little bit longer stemmed, and then you can start to add these in. What you might find then is you need an additional wire, because of course you're running out of stem and strength quite quickly. So you could use additional 28 gauge wires, or you could add in 26 or 24 gauge wires that are thicker and potentially longer. So this could come, okay, I just want to make that a bit longer. Drop my next one in, and so on. Just make yourself a little bit of a chain, which would be quite nice. Maybe focused around as a circle, a little wreath on the top of your cake, or around the base of your cake. We'll just finish taping down. But if you're making the garland, leave yours separate until we're ready to put everything together. Okay, so I hope that you enjoyed yourselves today, and yeah, I look forward to seeing you again soon. Bye bye for now.